Then here we have Shada. Need to get around to buying the animated version. Have not seen this version yet, but the book itself is fantastic. Full Circle, signed by Matthew Waterhouse. Not that good of an opener to the E-Space trilogy. Then here we have State of Decay, signed by Waterhouse again, which was alright. Warrior's Gate, which is a fantastic closer to the E-Space trilogy, again signed by Waterhouse. Then here we have The Keeper of Traken, signed by Waterhouse and Sarah Sutton. Great story, that. Logopolis, hand signed by Waterhouse again. Pretty not that good in my opinion. Used to be one of my all-time favourites, but it's not anymore. It's not that good. Cash of Alva, another one that I need to re-watch, but I do remember it being alright. And here we have Kinder, which is a fairly recent addition to the collection, one that I do need to watch. Visitation, again another one that I need to re-watch. We'll be watching all of these again with the season 19 set at some point. Then here we have Earthshock, which is a fan held high classic, and I do agree it is a fantastic story. And as you can see, it is signed by Matthew Waterhouse. Snake Dance, really interested by both of the Mara stories, as I do believe they both deal with the occult, so very interested in giving that one a go after I look at Kinder. Then here we have the original edition of the Five Doctors from 1999, the very first Doctor Who DVD ever released. Then here we have the Five Doctors, the 25th anniversary edition, which is hand signed by Mark Strickson. This is a fantastic story to celebrate an anniversary of the show. It's absolutely fantastic and is one of the best Fifth Doctor stories in my opinion, and is one that I have reviewed. The Awakening there, which is pretty bad in my opinion. Same can be said with Warriors of the Deep, which is a terrible story. Resurrection of the Daleks, which is my personal favourite Dalek story from the 1980s. I think this is fantastic. And closing off the Fifth Doctor's run, we have the Caves of Androzani, which is an absolutely fantastic story, if a slightly bit overrated in my opinion. I do watch this story sometimes and wonder if the characters have schizophrenia, because there's so many of them just talking to themselves. Alright then, with a bit of a different setup, we are now moving on to the Sixth Doctor stuff. Starting off with the first story of his first television season, Attack of the Cybermen, which is a story that I do need to re-watch, but I do remember it being pretty good. Then here we have Vengeance on Varos, which is hand signed by the man himself, which I got signed by him at Birmingham Comic Con 2019, the third time that I actually met him, and the third time that I actually met my favourite living actor that played the Doctor. So yeah, Vengeance on Varos, fantastic story, probably my personal favourite from his television run, but Terror of the Vervoids does get close. Very violent, gritty story that. Then here we have The Two Doctors, which is a story that I desperately need to watch because it is my third and second favourite Doctors coming together in one story, and I am just massively looking forward to watching this story. I still haven't seen it somehow, and I desperately do need to see it again. And a bit of an interesting thing about this DVD is I believe there was a controversy quite a few years ago where people were like asking the BBC to reissue it, this specific edition, because there's a thing with Jimmy Savile in the special features of this DVD release, and with all of the things coming out about him at the time, people were asking the BBC to re-release this DVD with that special feature removed, so bit of an interesting thing that. Then we have Time Lash, which is one of the more hated Colin Baker stories. I personally quite like it, but again I do need to give it another re-watch, but I do remember it being a pretty good story. Bit of a weird one that. Then here we have Revelation of the Daleks, which I have 2 different copies of, one of which is the slipcover edition, like the Spearhead from Space DVD I showcased earlier. And the other one is actually hand signed by Colin Baker. I unbelievably found this in a local CEX for only £5, hand signed by him. And I had a voucher in CEX for I think about £10, so I just decided to buy it. But yeah, Revelation of the Daleks it's alright, but it's one story that I do need to rewatch again, but I am kind of dreading to, because there's a lot of things to this story that I like, but man oh man do I hate the DJ character. I absolutely hate him. And then we begin the Trial of a Time Lord saga, one of my personal favourite seasons of Doctor Who, with the first 4 episodes, The Mysterious Planet, which is, I would say, the weakest part of the Trial of a Time Lord personally. I will say that throughout the entire 14 episode saga, the sort of trial scenes and what have you that are scattered throughout all 14 episodes are phenomenally consistent and absolutely fantastic. But with regards to the actual story on Vervoids, I found it to be a bit average, and as such this is my least favourite story from the Trial of a Time Lord. It's okay to watch, and it's a decent enough opener for the Trial of a Time Lord, with a lot of fantastic trial scenes and what have you, but the core central story itself on Vervoids left a bit to be desired in my opinion. And then this is where the Trial of a Time Lord really starts getting into gear here, with parts 5 to 8 Mind Warp, which is an absolutely fantastic story with a return for Sil, and a lot of people love this story. I do think it's maybe a slightly bit overrated, but it's still a great story and is my second favourite entry from the Trial of a Time Lord saga. Very, very 1980s story though. There's a lot of neon in it, and I think gay nightclubs possibly. Then we have parts 9 to 12 with Terror of the Vervoids. This is my personal favourite section of the Trial of a Time Lord. I think this is an absolutely fantastic space murder mystery story, and it's just fantastic in my opinion, and it's one of my favourite Colin Baker TV stories. I think it's just fantastic, and the cliffhanger to episode 1 is incredible. Then here we have the concluding 2-parter, The Ultimate Foe, with a slightly extended second episode, which is what caps off everything to the Trial of a Time Lord saga. And yes, this story is a bit of a mess, I can kind of see that, but I do quite like it at the same time. It's nice to see the Valiard and the Master and the Doctor all together in kind of one weird little concluding story to the Trial of a Time Lord. I quite like all of the Matrix stuff. All of the Gallifreyan and sort of trial stuff is fantastic once again in my opinion. It could have been a lot better, but for what it is, I think it's a pretty damn good ending to the Trial of a Time Lord. It's nothing amazing and it could have been better, but I do think it is really good. But then again, Robert Holmes died after writing part 1 and only doing an outline of part 2, sadly, so it could have been a lot better, and nothing really much could have been done about its overall quality, I guess you could say, considering that Robert Holmes died unfortunately partway through writing and working on this story. But for what it is, I think it's a pretty good way to conclude the Trial of a Time Lord. One of my favourite seasons of Doctor Who, because I'm an absolute sucker for the Gallifrey stuff. I absolutely love it. But yeah, Ultimate Foe, good concluding story. Could have been better, which couldn't be really helped, but it caps off one of my favourite seasons of all time, the Trial of a Time Lord, pretty damn well. Then we're moving on to the 7th Doctor now. We have Dragonfire. I have a complete run of the 7th Doctor stuff, bar his first 3 stories. Time and Irani, I think it's called, Paradise Towers and Delta and the Bannerman, but I think I've managed to save the worst 3 for last somehow. But either ways, Dragonfire, really good story in my opinion, really good actually. Bit of a baffling cliffhanger to it, but it is a nice sort of three-part Sylvester McCoy story. Then here we have 2 copies of Remembrance of the Daleks, a fairly tatty, as you can see, DVD copy in the slipcover sort of range. And here we have the special edition DVD of it here, which I got hand signed by Sylvester McCoy at Dimensions 2016. Absolutely fantastic story. A bit overrated, and I don't need to see it ever again because I've watched it so many goddamn times. But it's a classic for a reason. It's fantastic. Then here we have the Happiness Patrol, which is I guess you would say, a bit of an overtly political story, but it is one that I do like quite a bit, and I think it is a good little Sylvester McCoy story. Then here we have Silver Nemesis. Oh gosh, that was awful. I need to rewatch it really, but I kind of don't want to at the same time because that is a terrible story. Then here we have The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, which I've only seen once, but I do need to give it another go, and I'm quite interested in doing so. Then here we have Battlefield, which I remember being a pretty damn awful story, if I remember right. I just remember the story being an absolute mess. But I do need to give it another watch, but I am kind of dreading in doing so. Then here we have the enigma that is Ghostlight, which was originally meant to be the Virgin New Adventures novel Lungbarrow. Basically, Mark Platt tried to write and get the Doctor Who story Lungbarrow made for TV. However, it was deemed too ambitious and ultimately became Ghostlight, with him writing Lungbarrow as the acclaimed and highly sought after Virgin New Adventures novel several years later. But for the TV story itself, Ghostlight, it's a complex, mad, kind of hard to follow story, but I do think it is a great one at that, but I do need to kind of give it a bit more time to like fully absorb it and what have you, because it is a mad and complex story. I know it's great, but I do need to spend a bit more time with it to like fully process and absorb it. Which I'm going to be doing with the work print edition on the season 26 box set sometime soon. Then we have the closing story for classic Doctor Who, Survival, which I got signed by Sophie Aldred at Birmingham Comic Con 2019. It's absolutely fantastic, although it does feel a little out of place in season 26 because Curse of Fenric, Battlefield and Ghostlight all have these kind of mythological and supernatural elements to them, whereas Survival doesn't really, although it does have some kind of horror elements of kind of like body transformation and what have you, I would have said, but it does feel a little out of place thematically with the rest of season 26 in my opinion. However, it is a fantastic closing story to classic Doctor Who, and it is just simply great, and it's the Doctor Who story with furries in it. You cannot go wrong with that. Then here we have More Than 30 Years in the TARDIS, the 1993 anniversary documentary. I have not watched this yet, but I do need to. And here we have the standard edition and the special edition of the TV movie, which it's alright. It's yet another thing in the Doctor Who canon that I do need to give another watch, but I do remember it being alright, if quite a bit cheesy, particularly with Eric Roberts. It does have some really good things to it though, in my opinion.